Hi cousins, how you doing? I'm Shemaya. It's like papaya, except it's not. And this is Plot Twist Please. Welcome to an office that is not my humble abode, which is probably what you're not used to seeing. New things, new things. This is a place where I like to use pop culture in order to make our brains a little cozier. I'm gonna try to not yell in this microphone today because it's a big habit that I have to fix. Yelling in microphones like I'm talking on a stage. There's some microphones before. Let me slouching so I can fit in the frame. Today I'm going to talk about infantilization. Now, I've talked about infantilization before on my channel, but I think that I'm coming back to that subject with a little bit more of a fresh eye and some nuance and a little bit of perspective on that as someone who is, a sprightly 20-something in the city. And I think I could shed some light on the topic. Let's get into it. If you don't know what it is, the typically understood definition of infantilization is treating someone who is not a child as if they are a child. Sometimes when you are a disabled person, people can view you as someone to be pitied, something that a lot of disabled people are used to hearing potentially. I can't believe that you are so brave just for like living. Like you're so brave for that. If I were you, I wouldn't want to be here. And it's like, oh, okay. But anywho, people do say these things, I think, with good intentions, quote, quote. I don't think anyone is trying to be malicious or trying to make fun of a disabled person when they say something like that. But it doesn't feel good to hear. It just makes it feel like our existence is something that should be pitied. And it's not. Disabled people are living happy, full lives. Disabled people are having children and partnership and experiencing romance and having full-time jobs and pursuing their dreams and changing the world, or eating popcorn on a Saturday night and having a good time. Like, disabled people operate in many different forms, and disabled people are allowed to live life without needing to justify them living a life by being inspirational. And so a lot of the time when people say things like this, it's almost as if they're using that disabled person as some sort of symbol rather than viewing them as an actual individual, with a soul, with a heart, with the brain, with agency. And that can be really disheartening. If you grow up being viewed as something to be pitied, then you can start to feel like something to be pitied. I can attest to this. I've personally experienced having people kind of treat me like what it felt like was people treated me like a pet, like this cute little puppy to put in their bag or this cute little accessory. And, having pretty privilege, being in alignment with the beauty standard, I was able to be in a lot of groups of people who accepted me, even if I didn't have to say much, even if I said just enough to get by. I got by in certain circles that I wouldn't have if I wasn't stereotypically attractive in many ways. And that's not to say, oh my God, I'm so pretty. I mean, I am, but I'm just drawing attention to a societal structure that tends to value people who are stereotypically more attractive than people who do not fit into that category. If you are deemed as more physically attractive, people tend to treat you more gently, or people think that you deserve to be treated more gently. Now, being a Black woman, that just gets a whole lot more complicated. Oh my God, why did I sound like I had like something at the back of my throat? I am so sorry. The thing about me was I was kind of treated like this little delicate thing, this delicate symbol of something that was other that people couldn't really figure out. And a lot of autistic people, if they do have those physical characteristics that I've described, then they tend to experience that same phenomenon. Now, people didn't even know I was autistic, but I had certain mannerisms and like my demeanor, I suppose, insinuated a sort of innocence. In the video that I talked about this previously, I broke down why someone might interpret an autistic person, the way they present themselves, their demeanor, their mannerisms, etc., as childlike. And so I do understand that for a lot of holistic people or non-autistic people, vocab word, perception really is reality for a lot of them. It's not making a judgment on that. Either way, it's just an observation. So from the holistic perspective, if someone has a special interest, that tends to be something that is more related to children or innocents like Disney or dolls or action figures. And autistic people do have what's called special interests a lot of the time. If their interests do fall into the same category as something that a child would also be interested in, then I understand how someone could perceive that person with that interest as childlike. If someone has mannerisms that are kind of like loosey goosey, or they don't really seem to be in control of the movements of their limbs, and some autistic people will come across that way just because of the way, the jelly moves through our bodies. And because there are a lot of sensory elements that we're taking in all at once, oftentimes, and we don't necessarily know how to mimic humans in the most accurate way. If you know what I'm talking about. So then, yeah, it could make sense to an holistic person to view an autistic person based on all those characteristics as innocent or childlike or needing to be babied. And that can take a toll on an autistic person's psyche. Now, for me, it took a lot of self-reflection and digging deep in self-actualization. I feel like that term doesn't really have a succinct meaning, but it took a lot of learning and re-educating myself in order to be able to have agency as an adult woman, who lives in the city nonetheless, because people will try you in the streets. They will try you in the streets. But yeah, I had to learn. I had to learn to put on my don't bother me face. I had to learn to walk with a purpose when I'm walking down the street. I had to learn to say no. I had to learn to have firm boundaries in my work life and in my personal life. And I think that is something that happens with a lot of autistic people as time goes on, as they mature. But one thing that I don't think autistic people are very good at a lot of the time. Now, I'm not trying to generalize here, because if you know one autistic person, you only know one autistic person. But me as an autistic person, from what I've experienced as myself, and from the people I have community with who are also autistic, I've learned that it can be difficult for us. Why did I just put on therapy? What is happening? What I don't know. I've had a long day. I have learned that it is incredibly difficult for a lot of us to understand how we come across. A lot of autistic people develop a sense of self based on the world around them. I'm trying to figure out how to say this in a way that makes sense. A lot of autistic people tend to develop a sense of who they are solely based on what they feel inside, rather than what's going on out here. And a lot of holistic people develop a sense of self in the opposite direction. So that's why, if the typical archetype, I guess, for an autistic person or even a neurodivergent person is someone who kind of goes against the grain. But the distinction between an autistic person and everybody else is that an autistic person doesn't even know that there's a grain to go against. We're not trying to be different. We don't know what the norm is. We are just existing, and what we are existing as just happens to be very different than what we see. And it's not that we don't know that we're different. It's just there is an original melody, right? The original melody is a melody that every non-autistic person is born knowing, and the autistic person has never heard the melody a day in their life. And so they're just going to sing on their own, and then what they're doing just happens to not correlate to the melody that everyone else agreed on. And so it just sounds really not dissonant, and not a good way. Like, it just sounds off because we were never taught the melody. And you know what, too? I realized that a lot of the ways that holistic people characterize other people in their communities, probably as a form of socialization in order to be able to determine who is safe, right? From the beginning of time. A lot of the time, holistic people will categorize folks, and autistic people are not very good at categorizing folks. We're not very good at being like, this is the hierarchy. I understand the hierarchy, and I'm going to act accordingly. A lot of us don't care. And when I say hierarchy, I'm talking about educators. I'm talking about bosses. I'm talking about, child versus parent. And now, over time, we learn that there are certain things you need to do in order to not get in trouble. Like, there are certain things you need to do in order to make money, but we don't inherently have a sense of urgency when it comes to hierarchies. Like, we don't automatically go, oh, of course you're in charge, so that therefore you're correct. We say, you're in charge, but why? Why are you in charge? Prove to me that you should be in charge. That's kind of just like how our brains work. It's like we can't just accept something as fact. We have to interrogate it. We have to interrogate every piece of information and figure out why it is deemed as rule of law. Ooh, it's fun to live in my brain and question everything. Yeah, I mean, honestly though, I kind of love that. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of love that we would like, for example, come across a child, like a random child, and not automatically think that that child is dumb or not. Or, I'm sorry, that's not. I think the word dumb is ableist. I have to find out whether or not that's an ableist word. But we don't automatically look at a child and assume that they don't know anything, or we don't automatically look at somebody who's a CEO at a multi-million-dollar company and immediately say they must be smarter than me. We will almost always demand, maybe not in someone's face, but like internally, we will need evidence that someone is in a position that they're in because they're supposed to be there. And this is just my opinion, just my thoughts. I do wonder if our lack of understanding or lack of urgency when it comes to hierarchies has anything to do with the way that we interact with people around us. Because if you walk through the world thinking it doesn't matter if I pretend to know what I'm doing, if I don't actually know what I'm doing, like I don't have to pretend. I actually don't have anything to prove. So I'm not going to pretend like I am self-important or like I am polished and put together. Like I'm going to have fun and I'm just going to decorate my house like it's a Barbie dream house, or I'm going to decorate my house like it's a comic book in real life. Frankly, I don't see anything wrong with that approach to life. I think there are a lot of people who move through the world who genuinely are proving something all the time or are feeling like they have to prove something all the time. And I think a lot of autistic people, if we start out that way, after a while, we're like, we're tired. We are tired. Moving through the world is enough. And like feeding ourselves and paying bills and socializing just to get through the day is enough. That other stuff, y'all can keep it. I think that's part of it as well. But all of these contributors play a role in other people who are not autistic perceiving us as childlike. Now, here's where the harm comes in. And I've talked a little bit about this previously, but when you think that you have no agency, or when you think you can't handle anything because people treat you like you can't handle anything, then you start to believe it and you start to not say no in dangerous situations or potentially dangerous situations. You start to question your own abilities. You start to question your own instincts. You start to question whether the evidence you've gathered is sound when it comes to determining who is and who is not safe for you to be around. When you treat someone like they are stupid, that is exactly how they will operate. The flip side of that is the accommodation side, right? Because there is something about infantilization that also makes you feel safe. But I would hate for us to conflate infantilization with accommodations. Because, okay, so I made a post a few days ago about the danger in infantilization of autistic adults. And besides the fact that it could put us in danger, it could also lead to us not taking responsibility for our actions because autistic people aren't perfect. Like, we're not angel baby clouds, okay? We're human and we make human mistakes. And if you treat an autistic adult, especially an autistic adult who does something egregious, as if they don't know any better, you pave the pathway for more harm at the hands of an autistic person. And that's no good. That's no good either. I think there's a difference between saying, I would like to be treated like an adult with the agency and with the ability to make my own decisions. I think there's a difference between that and being like, sometimes I need someone to make dinner for me. Sometimes I need groceries delivered. Maybe a lot more than sometimes. Maybe I need an app on my phone to remind me to eat, an app on my phone to remind me to shower. Maybe I need my partner or my friend or my sibling. It just because I hate to handle this conversation without delicacy because every kind of autistic person can function differently. And, without the use of functioning labels, because we've discovered that they're not very useful in this day and age. But people have different needs, people have different capacities, and people have different kinds of access to resources. And to say just a blanket statement of, autistic people can do everything ourselves, leave us alone, leaves the people who need a lot of accommodations out to dry. Because no, it is not fair to force us into a role where we are pitied, but we can choose to put ourselves in a role where we are handled gently and taken care of. That's the thing, because when we approach infantilization, oh my god, and my light is leaving. I have to finish this video. Oh my gosh, my light is leaving me. When we are approaching infantilization for any other marginalized group, I notice a pattern. It is okay for the person in that marginalized group to decide where they would like to be, like to decide that they want to be cared for, to decide that they want to be treated gently, to decide that they want to be feminine, to decide that they want to cook and clean and raise the kids. It is not okay for someone to force them in that position. So I tried to break that down to make it a little easier to chew on. Like, share, and subscribe. Be blessed and stay weird.